Today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
And now we're moving into this third era where payroll providers and employers themselves are recognizing this is where consumers' financial lives begin. And if we want to give consumers not just sort of the full picture of their financial lives, but also position them in the best way to make the best decisions with all of that information, then it's really the best place to sort of get people going with their finances.
Welcome to the Tearsheet Podcast. I'm Tearsheet's editor-in-chief, Zack Miller. The first era of next-generation financial companies focused on the bank account as a store of information and value for consumers' and businesses' financial lives. That's changing, though, as fintechs and data aggregators go deeper into payroll data and payments. The topic is becoming more urgent since the PPP rollout earlier this year. Ben White from Plaid's policy team has recently authored a report on the value of payroll data, and he joins me on the podcast to discuss what payroll data access is, why it matters, and the opportunity it presents for future fintech innovation. A link to the white paper is included in our article on our website. Ben White is my guest today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
Hi, I'm Ben White. I am on the policy team at Plaid. Specifically, my title and role is policy R&D. So I have the very fortunate position to be sort of looking out at the horizon and seeing, not just what policy changes might affect our business directly, but also how policy changes can open more opportunities for open finance and data connectivity to provide better products and services to consumers. And that is, of course, where this payroll work fits in, as we see, policy and regulatory developments around consumers' control of data and sort of broader interest across ecosystems in incorporating that into a suite of products and services. It's an exciting place to be to sort of think through as we as a company explore how we can impact those spaces, what that looks like from a policy side, again, both in the ways that we are affected by policy and the ways that policy changes in other parts of the world can open up more space for consumers to benefit from control of their data.
Very interesting. Before we hop into the payroll discussion, I'm curious, how did you get into this type of field?
Sure. Well, the payroll piece in particular is really fascinating to me because it's a space that I've been sort of working in for a while without, necessarily working at a payroll company. So a couple of years back, I actually started a fintech company myself with a friend of mine that was focused on delivering financial wellness products and services in the workplace. And I sort of had this realization that there's a lot of paycheck to paycheck workers out there, a lot of sort of low to moderate income consumers who are working at companies that want to keep them around. Our first target market for our fintech was focused on small manufacturing companies where employees are making $13, $15, $17 an hour and are providing really valuable services to that company, but maybe are still struggling themselves financially. And it's at companies like that where turnover is a real challenge. So the problem that we wanted to solve for them was, how can we leverage technology, specifically, the smartphone? This is 2015, 2016, around the time that we were launching this product, to deliver products and services directly to employees in the workplace. And what we found was that there was a real sort of open space there to leverage technology to better deliver those products and services that meet people where they are. I think that continues to be a real focus of fintech in particular. So I worked on that fintech company for a couple of years and then made my way to Washington, recognizing that there were policy changes afoot that were potentially solving these problems at scale. So specifically, how can we think beyond sort of the traditional employee benefits around things like, payroll and providing better financial products, things like emergency savings, better benefits that can, again, meet consumers where they are. But, even as they think about policy changes, like how can we improve upon the 401k, you still need, those products and services to reach those consumers. And the workplace is really where their financial life starts. So it's really exciting now to be at Plaid, at a place where we recognize that for many of those products to function, data connectivity is really fundamental. If you want to provide someone with a savings account at the workplace, you need to be able to connect via payroll to a bank account. So it's really exciting now to be in a position to see how our company can fulfill that objective of delivering those services.
It's really interesting. It's almost like we're shifting our attention away from the bank account sort of as the main repository of financial information about a customer into the workplace, which actually it has broader implications, I think.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of our more exciting sort of revelations in this white paper is that the field of payroll is sort of entering into a new era where we broke it down into three eras. The first is really focused on how can you pay taxes on behalf of your employee, things like Social Security and Medicaid and federal and state income taxes, of course. The second generation, with the advent of the pension and the 401k, and with healthcare being something that was provided directly via the employer, that was sort of the ways that they sought about delivering services in the workplace. And now we're moving into this third era where payroll providers and employers themselves are recognizing this is where consumers' financial lives begin. And if we want to give consumers not just sort of the full picture of their financial lives, but also position them in the best way to make the best decisions with all of that information, then it's really the best place to sort of get people going with their finances. And back to my experiences with the startup, we sort of thought about our target customer as someone who, maybe they went to school, maybe they didn't go to school, maybe they went to, a technical training school and they're working for an auto parts company. And they want to work there for their entire lives, but they never had any sort of financial education, and they don't really know where to begin. And the workplace is maybe the first time that they're earning a paycheck and the first time that they're thinking about how can they improve and make the most of their finances. And so to start there and to provide them with those services that meet them where they are was a really, really powerful way to give people control over their finances.
And how accessible historically, Ben, have payroll companies been in terms of sharing that data?
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about these developments as sort of a bit of a time lag behind where the banking sector itself has moved. So an interesting data point that I don't think made it into the paper, but that I found really interesting, is that in 2018, 80% of payroll providers were offering something like an online portal, which of course is sort of a precursor to data connectivity. The legacy methods of providing consumers access to their data is giving them the ability to download a PDF statement from an online portal. But the reason that 80% number is so fascinating is because 80% of banks offered online banking in 2006. So 12 years later, the payroll industry had reached the same level of online offerings that the banking industry had reached. So that's pretty good penetration still, I think, in terms of providing 80%. It's not like there's necessarily a dramatic lag. But now that infrastructure has been built, there is the opportunity for companies like Plaid to step in and say, okay, you're providing consumers this access to their data on a one-off basis. How can we layer on top of that, using the models that we've built in the banking sector to give them the sort of data connectivity that can allow them access to the full suite of fintech products and services.
Interesting. So can we talk about maybe some of those use cases, I guess, that as you guys are starting to think about or have witnessed and putting together this white paper that I guess can change, have an impactful change on consumers' lives?
Absolutely. So the way that we broke it down in the white paper was really a view to the impact that fintech can have on consumer lives in general, and the way that fintech companies go about building their products. And there's really two ways that they do this. The first is by digitizing manual processes. So, innovation in the sense of taking things that were once manual, making them simpler and more seamless by digitizing them and providing that connectivity with data. In the payroll space, what this looks like is, if you are applying for a mortgage and you need to download your pay stub in order to share it with your mortgage lender, now there could conceivably be products and services that leverage data connectivity like what Plaid provides that allow you to do that in one click. And I think about a colleague of mine who purchased a house earlier this year, of course, during COVID, when everything was more and more highly scrutinized. And,
Yeah.
of course, for lenders, it was hard to tell, if you're employed this week, you might not necessarily be employed next week with what's going on in the economy. And so, one of my colleagues had applied for a mortgage, and they were hitting her up once a week to provide her employment verification. So every single week, she had to log into the payroll provider that we use, download that pay stub, proof of employment, and upload it to the lender. That's something that is a pretty tremendous pain point in a consumer's life. To have to do a task repeatedly again and again. I think in some instances, friction can be good. In a way like that, not so much. So that's just one example of, if there are recurring needs to provide that sort of verification, that's where sort of digitizing the manual processes can come in. The second element, which I think is even more exciting, is, once you've opened up that space for connectivity to exist, you can really lean into customization. So again, looking at the credit space, where I think this is really compelling, the advent of what's been called alternative data, but I think is becoming so mainstream that alternative is maybe not the best way to describe it. But things like cash flow underwriting for lending, those types of models that are still being built and continue to develop and to get better, the types of data that you can pull in from a consumer's payroll, things around how much are they contributing to their retirement accounts, how much are they putting away in their FSA or their HSA, these are all really, really valuable data points for lenders who want to do anything from a personal loan to an auto loan, again, all the way up to a mortgage loan. So, just to sort of reiterate, there's really that breakdown as we see it along those two lines. The first is, how can you remove some of that really unnecessary friction and pain point into consumers' lives of having to log into a website, download a statement, upload it via PDF, or even send it out via email. And the second is, once you've established that data connectivity, where are there innovations that we might not even see yet that are incentivized by consumers having this control?
That's interesting. And payroll companies, you said they were headed on this sort of journey anyway. What is their incentive to share that data?
Yeah, well, this is, I think, a really cool and sort of important distinction. And what makes the timing of this really compelling for payroll companies is that, Plaid and many of companies like Plaid have been operating in the banking space for a while. So we've just continued to get better and better about collaborating with, what you might call the data holders.
Mm-hmm.
Plaid just announced last week that our intention is by the end of next year to have 3/4 of our traffic onto APIs. So the industry and the ecosystem has just gotten better and better at building this connectivity. But what sets payroll apart from sort of mainstream financial institutions is that they're not themselves already offering these products and services. There's not really the competitive tension there for them. In fact, it's really a pure value add. I mean, if you think about payroll as primarily a business-to-business model, they're really competing on features and on things like customer service and how well they can meet the needs, not just of the company that they're providing services to, but increasingly of that company's employees as well. And we've even seen, some of the larger and more innovative payroll companies stand up some of these services in-house. So Plaid has worked with Gusto to stand up some of their services that are now offering things like a mobile wallet to the employees of Gusto's customers. And companies like ADP are offering a third-party marketplace where, again, it's not just the B2B model, but increasingly a B2B2C, where the end user, the employee at any company that's using these payroll providers can have access to a much broader suite of services than might otherwise have initially been offered. So payroll companies, I think, really stand to benefit and to differentiate themselves, and again, might not necessarily feel the same sort of competitive tension where third parties, can come in and sort of eat away at some of their core products, because these are really new spaces for them to be operating in, and really great opportunities for them to provide a broader suite of services to their customers.
Got it. And Ben, it sounds like what you're saying is once this payroll data is opened and so the infrastructure laid, that there might be another like sort of wave of fintech companies that are sitting on top of that are doing things that they couldn't have done before.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. And as I mentioned earlier, what I find so exciting about my work is being able to look out at the policy horizon at changes that one might not think would directly implicate the fintech ecosystem, but where if we were to establish this sort of data connectivity, there could be another, sort of Cambrian explosion of products and services. And one place that I'm particularly excited about, and I think especially as we see, some potential real policy changes with an administrative change in the government, we think about the ways that work is changing. We've heard about the future of work for years and years, and not making any judgments on where anyone falls on issues like, should we have a two-tiered employment system where some workers are full-time and get all the benefits of being a W-2 employee, and others are contract workers who might be working for any of these gig companies, and as a result don't have the same level of access. And one space that I've been particularly interested in that I think payroll data connectivity can play a massive role in is things like portable benefits. If we want to have sort of a third classification of workers that is not full-time and not part-time contractor, but we still want to be able to provide them with all the benefits that come with working in a modern economy around retirement and healthcare, and even things like healthcare savings and flexible spending. Data connectivity can go a tremendously long way to opening up spaces for that sort of innovation. And I think we're going to see, some of these changes, whether it's just in California or across the country, where there will be new consumer demand among this workforce for access to this sort of benefits. And payroll companies, whether they're partnered with those firms or not, can really make an impact on delivering those services to those workers.
And I have to imagine, Ben, that it's not just standalone payroll data, but the real power of what you're talking about is the marriage of payroll data with banking and transactional data. For any type of fintech company, for any app that's trying to build, you really need to be able to see the entire picture. Is that right?
So at Plaid, what we're so excited about in terms of adding payroll to our broader suite of services is increasingly seeing existing customers and new customers incorporating this payroll data into their existing use cases to enhance the products that they're already providing that are so valuable to their customers.
Ben White, thank you for joining us on the Tearsheet Podcast today.
Thanks, Zack. It's been great.